Obviously, there's hazelnut infusion on those beans, but it's a light roast and a medium dark roast combination. We add some of that to the fermenter a few days before centrifuging, and then we make a cold brew that we push into the bright tank, and it all gets mixed together and carbonated, coming out of the centrifuge. So yeah, it's a fun thing. And this was something that our production manager, Josh Maxson, probably back before he was the production manager and just working on casks and pins and ideas as part of his cellar job came up with. So, nice riff on the Gray's Lake Nessie.
Did really well. I'll be honest, even though I'm from the Northwest and kind of grew up in Seattle and split time between Seattle and Portland, I'm not a big coffee fan.
Okay.
And the coffee note in this is like, it could almost get me to drink coffee. Like this, like the one thing that I've always loved about coffee is the smell. I've not done really well with the taste of it or the heat of it. I don't like hot beverages that much.
Okay.
But that plus what the hazelnut brings in here, because I get some chocolatey notes from the hazelnut as well. I and I'm not just saying this because you're here. I would actually drink this beer. Like usually I would shy away. Like I'll do a tasting flight as much as my bartending history makes me stay away from tasting flights. But I would try so I could get a little bit of, I'll try something that's off board for me. But this would lead, like just a taster, this would lead me to good dive in and do a full pint of this for sure. So
Awesome.
well done with this for sure.
Well, cheers to that. Thank you.
Cheers, cheers. What do you think, Jonathan?
I'm I'm just gonna keep drinking it. So you guys just talk while I just finish this whole pint. No, opposite to Tom, I love coffee, but I also really like hazelnuts, macadamia nuts, anything like that. Normally, I'm gonna be honest, John. Normally, I'm not a flavored coffee fan. I like just black, straight coffee.
Sure.
But
Sure.
but with this, with the hazelnut and that coffee, with just the richness of the malts, the sweetness, but you get that slight like chocolate malt like bitterness on there.
Yeah.
It is I don't want to mess up the drink, but I do want to put a scoop of vanilla ice cream and make a beer
Oh
float with
yeah.
this and
Yeah.
just have this all year round, have it in right now, nice, like next to a fire, and then in the summer have this as a float and just enjoy it all year.
Oh yeah.
It's has such complexity to it that you kind of can use it in all those ways.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
it has a good base of Simpson's Golden Promise. That's one thing we didn't skimp on. And there's a little bit of chocolate malt, a little special bee, and a little roasted barley. So pretty small portions on those, especially malts though. That's just a whole lot of Simpson's Golden Promise. But
Getting a
yeah,
lot of love in the chat for this
Yeah.
beer as well. Um,
nice.
I don't know if anyone's not trying to be, or everybody's trying to be positive or whatnot, but getting a lot of, I wouldn't necessarily do this, but this gets me to drink it, that sort of thing. One question from the chat: does Confluence do the Scotch Ale base by itself? Um,
Yes.
on
So
that.
we wouldn't consider this like a Scotch ale per se. We have another beer. It's called Old Chungus or Big Chungus and Old Chungus, in which we can talk about in a minute. But yeah, Gray's Lake Nessie, just straight up like 80, 90 shilling Scottish ale. Absolutely. And so these beers, they start out as the same beer. And sometimes toward the end of the season, we'll brew a little bigger batch and split it between whatever's going to finish us out for the season on each format. And split it up to do regular Nessie and hazelnut Nessie. And so yeah, no, it's a favorite. We do like our coffee around the brewery. We buy the whole
Mhm.
beans, and usually this time of year we've got some hazelnut beans sitting around
Yeah.
because we purchased, more. It's like, hey, throw in some like 10 pounds of extra beans there.
Yeah. How
Yes.
big is your brewing system there at Confluence?
We have a 20 barrel brew house, and we started with a two vessel system that was meant to be expanded to four. So we've got a mash kettle slash whirlpool slash boil kettle, and then a water tub. And so, as a home brewer, I wanted to be able to do whatever I wanted to with the grains and mash however, we needed to for each specific beer. And so that's why we got the mash mixer and the kettle the way we did. And then in 2 years in, we were ordering the other two vessels, which is a dedicated boil kettle and a whirlpool. So we went from making one beer a day to now we do 4 turns a lot of
Oh
days.
wow.
So um yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're not so big, but we, this year, a lot of years we brew Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and it would be, as we grew, we would just stack beers, stack
Hmm.
brewed together. And so like Des Moines IPA is our flagship. That's like 45% of our sales. And that's typically 80 barrels a week. So that's a 4 turn day. It starts at 4 a.m. and finishes about 10:30, 11 with two main brewers. And then, the rest of the week is how do we stack them together? And, this year or last year, we went a little over 8,000 barrels, and we'll hit like 8,500 this year, I think. So we just, in the summer, we get pretty busy and that brew week expands and gets kind of filled up.
I hear you.
So,
So,
yeah.
do you? How far do you distribute out? Do you stay within state, or do you get it outside of Iowa at all? Or
So we're just in state. Classified as a native brewery, so we have the ability to self-distribute, and we've kind of taken full advantage of that over the years. We have about a 2.5 hour radius that we travel and get beer all the way from the east to the west around along the mid section of the state. So Council Bluffs over to Davenport, and then we make it up to like Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, Cedar Falls, and down to the southeast. And a lot of people won't recognize, what I'm talking about, but
mm.
um, we've got a fleet of about 7 vans and a box truck and 5 salespeople, seven
Oh wow.
drivers. So it's a big department, and yeah, and we're also distributing other beer. So our license allows us to distribute basically any other beer that we want. We could do canned cocktails, which we don't, but we have a cidery. As long as it stays under a certain percentage of alcohol, we can distribute cider. There was a meadery that did session mead that we distributed, you know. So yeah, that's about 20% of our distribution is outside brands.
Awesome. Uh,
Yeah.
it, so what's the brewing what are the brewing laws like in Iowa? Are they pretty strict, or are they, I mean, it sounds like you have to be a distributor to move it throughout the rest of the state and whatnot. What any hurdles that you've had to jump over or figure out?
The state was pretty gracious when we began, and the laws I thought were pretty good compared to a lot of other states where we were allowed to have one retail license, so we could have a tap room right away. And over the years, a couple years ago, they allowed us to have a second tap room. And so there's like a native brewery classification and a brew pub classification. And the native, you're allowed to be on all three levels, all three tiers, to the tune of 2 retail licenses now. If you're a brew pub license, you can have as many retail outlets, but you can't distribute. So, that's probably pretty common across the country,
Mhm.
but yeah, things are pretty good. I was not involved in the guild. Like our business was, one of our partners was involved, but in 2018, I think it was, the distributors kind of took us to task and they wanted to put a cap on our self-distribution.
Mm.
So that's when I jumped in and said I need to like help out however I can. And so we were able to get things maneuvered so it wasn't, an unrealistic cap, but still, they put a cap on us. So
Mhm.
yeah, so we
What are you gonna
definitely
do? Yeah, what are you gonna do with those? I'm gonna jump back into the chat a little bit
I was
here.
gonna say the
Something
chat
that we
is
talked
blowing
about.
up. The chat is
Yeah,
blowing up, Tom.
one of the things that we talked about pre-stream was the idea of this is a beer that you can drink cold out of the can, right out of the fridge, but you can also let it sit at room temperature and whatnot. Can you tell us a little bit about what we should be expecting in the different temperatures that we might be drinking this beer at?
okay. So I think cold, obviously it's just going to be a little more compact, and you're going to get a little bit of that sweet malt and some of the chocolate notes, but I took mine out, a little before 7 Central Time, just in preparation, and didn't crack it till like 7:40. So it's been out 45 minutes, and it's nice and warm now, and everything's
Mhm.
just kind of expanded. And yeah, just I would say the chocolatey notes come through, even though there's not a ton of chocolate malt. Um,
Mhm.
it just kind of comes through nicely. I believe that's Chateau chocolate malt and a little bit of Special B, but again, very small percentages, just enough to kind of give it a little color, a little nuance, and then that roasted barley kind of finishes it off.
So
Yeah,
some
this.
people, oh, go
Go
ahead,
ahead, John.
Tom. Okay.
Nope, nope, nope.
All right, I'll interrupt. So some people were wondering because you do get like that chocolate, especially as it's warming up. And I always like to drink a beer like this, especially if it's going to expand in like a goblet or something or tulip, so I can get my hand on there to start warming
Mhm.
it. Um, but some people are asking because you go with the hazelnut coffee,
Right.
and was there a specific reason for the hazelnut? And have you tried it with other like coconut or other flavors added into that as well? Or is it just you landed on hazelnut coffee and just this is good. This is good. Let's not mess with what, if it's broken, not broken.
Yeah, great question. I think the trial run that we did was hazelnut coffee, and again, that goes back to production manager having an idea and wanting to play with that, and it worked on a small scale, so we ramped it up. And there's beers that we play around with a lot. This is not one, that we've tried anything crazy like coconut or anything. I hate to say crazy, but I could definitely see that working with this beer, but. I think it just works well. I think plain coffee would just not quite do the trick, you know. And so that hazelnut influence comes through really nice, almost like a Nutella with that little bit of chocolatey flavor. So um, yeah, there are lots of beers that we play around with, and we can talk more about that if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think every single person is loving this beer. Everyone's wanting you to distribute into other states, which I
Okay, thank
obviously, yeah, obviously you are only in state, so there's not really any way, I guess, unless they do a road trip to come get it from you guys. Is there a plan to go any further? I know, obviously, we just discussed there are some tricky laws with you guys.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, the only thing holding us back is just if we wanted to sell beer in any other state, we could talk to a distributor and get that done. But our goal isn't to be the biggest necessarily. We do over 100 different beers in a year. So it's more about, just, I guess, serving our customers well. Um, that I would love to send beer all over the country. We're currently working, one of our initiatives is direct shipment. And so that's a legislative agenda item that we have. And it's probably not going to happen in 24, but maybe 25 or 26. I know we'd love to be doing that. So cheers to y'all.
Absolutely. Well, I guess that just means we'll just have to keep on having you back in our boxes from year to year. So all who are wanting this, we can bring it back and give you reason to buy our boxes more. So this might be a marriage that we can bring together and keep on going with that. Can you tell us a little bit about the can art that you have with it? It is a very interesting. I mean, it's got some cartoonish notes to it. If we're talking about beer notes and flavorings and that sort of stuff. But how did this come around? I'm guessing Gray's Lake is also something that's near your location as well. It
Yeah.
makes sense to have Nessie with the Scotch ale and whatnot. But tell us a little bit more about that and how you could come up with that.
So Grays Lake is between our building and downtown Des Moines. So we're south of downtown, and then if you're downtown, you hit Grays Lake, and it's a great attraction. A lot of people like to go walk around Grays Lake, get some exercise. We have a bike path that runs between us and the lake, and the lake's probably about 1,000 feet from our building. So you can see it from our tap room, and it's just an attraction in town. And so we built an extension of the bike trail from the bike path that goes, through town and also around Grays Lake, and just kind of join them together. And so I think from day one, it was just like, that lake's got a Nessie monster. So So we coined it that way, and then the artwork is actually, I think it's called woodcut. So it's we had an artist do the detailing on that and stamp it out for us. So kind of a neat process. And this one has a different shade. It's got a different color scheme to it than the regular Grace Lake Nessie, just to show the difference. But yeah, fun stuff. Like we've involved quite a few artists in our can art, and there's a lot of graphical treatments as well. 818 is a local company, and they've been with us since day one doing our artwork. So we love them to death, and they do an awesome job.
All right. Well, wonderful for that. Let's see. Let's dig back into some of it. Jonathan, is there anything standing out from the chat that we should bring up right now that
Well,
you've seen?
everybody wants to taste Big Chungus, and everybody wants to drink beer 365 days out of the year. That's the overall consensus. I was just wondering if you have ever seen the local Grays Lake Nessie.
I can't comment on that.
Okay, there you go. Nice.
I can't confirm or deny, but he might be out there.
Might
So
be
yeah,
out there.
so Big Chungus, that is our Scotch ale, and we won an award last year, a World Cup gold medal for Old Chungus, which is the barrel aged version. It's the bourbon barrel aged version of Big Chungus, and so that was fun, and that's a neat beer. That's a double mash for us, and I think double mash means a few things to people, but for us, it is basically designing about a 15 Plato word for grain bill. We collect that word and send it back to the mash kettle. And so we've got the wort sitting there, and then we grain in again into that word, and we collect again. And we end up with, 27, 28 Plato runnings. And by the end, it's around a 28 Plato starting gravity. So big beer, lots of residual sugar, and probably a 3 to 4 hour boil on that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So you said you mentioned that you have a home brewing past.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the transition from home brewer to having your own brewery and how that's gone for you. I'm sure there's some aspiring home brewers who may be watching today. Always love to hear horror stories as well as the good things that come around with that as well.
Sure. No, that's great. So I love home brewing. I've got kind of like an engineering background per se. I was a physics major in college, and I just enjoyed the engineering pieces of it. So I had almost as much fun building my brew system as I did brewing, and transitioned to a 10-gallon system. Worked on that and had like a Herm system, sort of not anything that I bought from anybody. It was just home built, and if I found a stainless welder, I would have them do some stuff for me and keep it going. So I kind of understood the basics of how it worked and how to make things work, right? Like I get the mechanical side of things. So as I left my job of 13 years with Graham Construction back in 2012, and I was a project manager when I left, and so I had some skills that way as well, like how to put things together on a project. And so basically spent that spring putting together the plan, all the things I needed, to make it work, and like the lease and the loan and the investors, got all that done. And throughout that process, I went to about 5 different breweries and just said, "Hey, can I spend a brew day with you so I can see what the big system looks like?" And that was super informative. I picked up several things on like yeast management. It helped me figure out that I wanted to get a specific mechanical brew system, which at the time was a great thing for me. And so just every visit that I made was impactful and kind of reassured me that, okay, it's just bigger stuff, right? It's valves and it's pumps and it's almost easier when you start involving CIP and things like that. So yeah, it was good. So first brews were a little rough. We
Mm.
started with first beer was Farmer John's multi-grain ale. So a lot of adjuncts, a lot of flaked, some wheat. And so I think what happened, we had a stuck mash, and so it took like probably close to 24 hours to brew. And
Wow.
just kind of sad, but a buddy from work was there with me, and we had some lawn chairs, and we were sitting right in front of the brew house trying to collect, and didn't quite know why it didn't work, but I don't know if we had rice holes in that batch or not, but we sure had them in the next one. And then about 8 batches in, whatever, we brewed Chewbacca, and that was more like that one took a long time. I slept at the brewery that night because it just was
Mm.
not collecting. And finally figured out that the mill was feeding grain too fast to the auger, and it wouldn't take it away fast enough. So it was remilling and turning it into flour.
Oh,
Um,
no.
it was kind of backing up into the rollers there. So that was one of those things that, okay, all right, I'm not going to feed grain so fast into the mill, and things kind of eased up after that. That was there's
Yeah.
a lot of learning moments for sure.
So did you jump right into a 20 barrel system from your homebrew system to that when you built that out?
Yeah, yeah,
So I
yeah.
imagine the learning curve was obviously, if you spent some nights while things brewed, the learning curve was probably pretty steep.
It was. It was. So it was doing all I could to figure out how to make it work better as fast as I could because, at that point I was kind of doing everything and couldn't spare
Yeah.
the extra time away. So, but
How long did it take you to come to the first beer that you made that you were like, yeah, I can do this. I've figured it out, from the starting point to where that was? Was it months? Was it a year? Where did you feel? How long did it take you to get there?
well, so the funny thing is, and I'll get there, but so that first batch was Farmer John's multi-grain ale, and I purchased two different yeast strains, and we split the batch so that we could propagate A56 and like the Scottish ale yeast. And so Farmer John's was made with two different yeasts. We kept it separate, and from day one, like I still know somebody that comes to the brewery every week and says, "Man, I wish I could try that Scottish version of Farmer John's again." But anyway, so Nessie was one of the very first, it might have been batch 4 that we did. And we used the yeast from the Farmer John's and pitched it, and that turned out really nice. And so, it didn't take too long to get to a point where it was like, this tastes like kind of like it should, but I'll tell you, like our flagship Des Moines IPA was probably 3 years of just little tweaks here and there. It's like a little less caramel malt, a little more of this, a little less, and it has 5 different hops in it, so it was like trying to balance those, and finally got to a point where it's like, all right, I think we're sailing on this one, but
Is
yeah.
that I what style of IPA would you say that is? Is it more of a West Coast? Is it I'm assuming not East Coast, or more of a English IPA, or where do you feel like it falls in
No,
the spectrum with that?
it's multi, it has a multi backbone, but it's regular Chico yeast and 75 IBUs, but it doesn't drink quite like 75. It gets a nice dry hop, but it gets dry hop after we basically grab all the yeast out of it. We try to have it as clean as possible when we dry hop it. And so I would call it more of a Midwestern. I mean, it's a little
Mhm.
fat on the West Coast, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm seeing more
Yeah.
Midwest Coast IPAs come out more and more. Like it's becoming something that's more featured and becoming a style, that is starting to compete against those other two sides of the coast. It feels like.
Right.
So, can you tell, like, uh, how would you characterize a Midwest versus? I mean, I think 1-to-1, it's probably more on the West Coast style than it is an East Coast style. But
Yeah.
how does it differ from that West Coast style? Would you say?
Probably not quite as crisp. I think we use a little more, we use some C15 and some C45 and a little biscuit malt with our raw 2 row. And so probably, I mean, we get down to like the mid, say 2.4 Plato on the final gravity, which it's pretty tight, but I'm guessing the West Coast would be closer to like 1.9 Plato.
Mm.
Just a little drier, a little more crisp. Ours is going to have just a little more mellow backbone of malt, a good balance. So, um, yeah.
Good shout out from the chat. Midwest IPA is more polite than a West Coast IPA.
More what?
That's probably very true.
More polite. That's a good one. Yeah, for sure.
I'm gonna throw a question to Jonathan real quick.
Go for it.
I did see earlier in the chat a pairing of some of Christmas chocolates and that sort of thing to be with this beer. What Jonathan is my resident pairing expert, whether he wants to admit it or not. Whenever I need to know what I need to pair a beer with, Jonathan comes up with it. What do you think would go well with this beer? What are some things that you would do with this beer?
Well, so I did see someone was pairing chocolate truffles with it, which 100%. Especially if you do like a hazelnut truffle or something that's more on that nutty side. I mean, I mentioned earlier making that beer float out of this. If I want to go with complementary flavors, then obviously I'm going to go with like a chocolate cake or just a nice dark chocolate. A truffle works really well, something that has that ganache, that bitterness of that dark chocolate. I'm getting fancy with you guys. Sorry, John. But then if I want to go with contrasting, I don't know if I would quite pair this with a blue cheese, just because of the hazelnut. However, I wouldn't be opposed of doing it with a Stilton, actually, with like a triple cream Stilton. You get that nice funkiness, but you get that slight nuttiness of that triple cream. Um, yeah, I mean, also, I just like it by itself.
Yeah,
I'm just
absolutely.
like, just by itself. But I would probably go more with like a dessert pairing, go more complimentary. Some darker beers, some Scotch ale, some stouts. Like I do like to do like a savory, sweet kind of balance of like a sausage or something, or like a smoked meat.
Mm.
Feel like this one though, it's you really wanted to go with those complimentary. I feel
Mhm.
like if I have something super savory and fatty, it's gonna overpower that hazelnut, and it's not gonna quite like it'll still be good. But I just feel that's my personal take. Is I think the truffles and like a nice dark chocolate, maybe not something too sweet, so not like a super sweet fudge and 85% dark chocolate. How about that?
Oh, that's
Good.
the nerdy foodie I've come to know and love for sure. With that,
Although Keith in the chat is saying bacon, and I'm with
I
you,
was
Keith.
I was thinking some ham, like
Yeah, yeah.
some maybe not super smoky, but some little savory there. Some 78% dark with some cacao nibs in it.
There you
Yeah,
go.
there you go. Yeah.
John,
No,
do you do
some
any brewers dinners or anything like that at the brewery at all?
We don't have a kitchen, so that's one thing we've stayed away from. We do have food trucks. I've done quite a few beer dinners over the years, and
Mhm.
yeah, there's one that comes back to me. It's Ossobuco. It was at a golf course, very nice golf course, and yeah, I don't remember if Nessie was part of that. I believe it was, but we also do a campfire black lager, and it's sort of like a smoky dark bock, and so that goes well with the smoked meats. But yeah, those are fun. There's been several golf courses. One did our Milkman Milk Stout um, with an ice cream, and we also do coffee, like straight up black coffee with our Milkman Milk Stout, and we add more lactose to the batch, so it's called coffee and cream Milkman. And that one you get like a really nice like espresso, I would say, type of coffee.
and
Yeah.
all of your coffee that you're using, are you using, I'm assuming you're using whole bean and you're sourcing it all locally, correct?
Yep. There's a few different local sources, and yeah, they're actually milling it or grinding it to kind of a coarser cold brew type of mill. So, like I said, we typically put a certain percentage in the fermenter with the beer and let that steep for about 2 to 3 days before we crash it and centrifuge it. So that's kind of important, I think, for the aroma side. And then we do the cold brew. We've got like a 5 barrel open top fermenter with a false bottom that we make a pretty big amount of cold brew with. So
Nice.
yeah.
And
All
one more
right.
person did have one last question, specifically about the Nessie with the hazelnut. Are you guys just sticking with traditional UK hops with this, just classic Scotch, and then just going in with that hazelnut?
So typically, I've always put a little crystal in, which is the US hop, but don't ask me why. I think it's got a little woodiness, but it also has a little fruity. And then East Kent Goldings would be typical. And over the years, like East Kent is a little tough to get sometimes. You can contract it. The people we were contracting with said, hey, we're not super stoked about the quality that we're getting, so we're just going to stop doing that. So I can still find it, but sometimes, we've used Challenger or Fuggles or whatever. I'm trying to think this year. First Gold is really nice. That's like a beautiful hop. So yeah, we try to stay traditional with all of our beers. If we're brewing German stuff, we get the German hops. We've got a Czech style pills, and that's, Czech Saaz right there.
Mhm.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah.
Before we let you go, is there anything that we should know about Confluence that you like, that you give us a reason to travel to Iowa other than amazing beer? Because obviously I haven't seen anybody tap out on anything as far as like, this is not something that I would drink. What's your pitch to get us to come to Iowa and drink more of your beer in person?
So we have a beautiful brewery, a big tap room, an amazing beer garden. We have 36 taps in our main tap room, and we have 12 taps in the beer garden. Um, just a huge selection. We have a root beer on tap, and we usually have like a cider. And so the rest of them are typically our beers. Like I said before, the last 3+ years, we've done about 110 different beers in a year. And that's not always new beers, but it's that many unique beers that we release in a year. And so come out and try the beer. We've got so many different things. We've done Belgians, we've done the English series. We do a ton of IPAs and hazies, but we're not afraid to just get out there. I mean, my home brewing experience and the people that have come to us with a passion for brewing always have ideas, and it's a lot of fun. Cheers to you all. Thanks for
Yeah.
joining.
Yeah, well, thank you. Like this is going to probably be one of the first beers that I poured during a stream that I'm going to make it through to the bottom. And again, I like a Scotch ale, but the coffee, not my style. You knocked it out of the park. You found the right balance. Very approachable and very crushable, even at the level that it is. Usually, I mean, part of it's probably the time of year. This is the time of year where stouts and porters and other dark beers get drank, and this was a nice warm hug with some different flavors that I'm not really used to. So thank you, John, for that, and thank you for sharing this beer with us, and thank you for coming on and spending some time to just chat about what went into it. So much appreciated.
Well, thank you, Tom and Jonathan. I had an awesome time, and thanks all the viewers for tuning in. This is a fun thing, and I'm going to finish
Absolutely.
mine as well.
Cheers. All right. Well, for the rest of you all who are still here, thank you for coming on and watching along. This was a mild start. It's going to get wilder. We got 12 days of this stuff, or 11 days of this stuff coming on. There's going to be some shtick coming along to fill this time. So yeah, you might see a bad Santa. Maybe. I don't know if he's smoking candy canes this year. We might be going back to that. We might break out some maltiness coming in. We're gonna have some fun. I wanted to ease into it. This is my first year hosting as the lead host, but this brew box has been my been a big part of my life for the last 3 years. I'm really excited to bring all this stuff to you all on who come through, who come and do the stream and that sort of stuff. Thanks for sticking around with us. It's going to be fun, and I'm sure I'm going to embarrass myself. And I'm going to try and embarrass Jonathan at some point, but we'll see if he plays along with that or not. But cheers to everyone. We're going to sign off for tonight. Thank you so much for all your questions and stuff in the chat. It adds so much to the stream for me and being able to prompt us along. We love answering your questions. And cheers to all. Good night. I guess is that how we should?
Sure.
How we should? Yeah. All right. I'm not so poetic, but anyway, thanks a lot. We'll catch you tomorrow night. Everybody come.